All right, we have a special guest this week on the podcast. We have Zach Dechant. Did I pronounce it right? I'm bad at English. English is not my
Yeah.
first language. Born Portuguese, so please forgive me. Go ahead and introduce yourself for anybody that may not know who you are, Zach.
Yeah, I am the Director of Human Performance at TCU. I've been in place here for this is my 16th year with TCU baseball. Prior to that, worked with football for about 13 or 14 years. And yeah, so baseball season just started last week. We're underway, and so life is busy.
So let's dive into actually, first of all, the 16 years. How can our listeners out there create stability in a world that's pretty unstable?
Yeah, so when I started in the field of strength and conditioning, I saw my mentors at the time. Just the field was. Hold on a second, Justin.
You're good.
Oh, sorry. Come on. I'm gonna have people popping in and out because my office becomes an equipment room.
You're good, dude. Don't worry about it.
So back to my thoughts there. I saw my mentors having a job hopping away, making 30 some grand at the time. This was 15 or 20 years ago, making 30 grand in strength and conditioning, working 80-hour weeks, and switching schools with their kids every 3 years for the next opportunity that was 5 grand more, 10 grand more. And early in my career, I moved, I think I had 13 or 17, I can't remember, something like that, 13 addresses in the first 3 years of my career. And I hated moving, and I didn't want to be that person. So I was just like every other strength coach, young strength coach, got to the job at TCU and thought, man, I'll be here 3 years and then it's on to something bigger and better. And it just didn't happen that way. I loved Fort Worth. I loved TCU. I loved the people that I was working with alongside my colleagues. And it just grew and we kept building baseball. The program kept getting better and better and better. And it just turned out to be a place where I wanted to stay, I guess. I really don't know how it happened, because I was a young strength coach that thought, man, I'm out of here in 3 years, right? I'm going to go somewhere else, next job, bigger, better, all this stuff. There wasn't anything bigger and better at the time, I guess. And we made TCU bigger and better.
How do you handle being on the road? So you're not traveling and having new addresses, but baseball season, it's a lot. Traveling with the team, how do you handle that? And any of our listeners out there that maybe they're basketball or baseball strength coaches and they're traveling and they're struggling with that balance, what would be a piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, so one of the best things that I've done in the last 2 years was out of necessity, and that was to move my morning groups. We found time in the afternoon to start training, especially with baseball. It was a nightmare having 6, 7 a.m. groups. And sometimes you have to do that. We had to do that previously, but we found and made time for our athletes to train later in the morning, early in the afternoon before practice. And that was one of the best things I've done to, I guess, create a better work-life balance. Because in the past, you'd be on the road for 4 days, you'd get back, in the Mountain West, we'd get back at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And then sometimes you'd have athletes in here at 6 a.m., right? Kids that didn't travel, they'd be in here at 6 a.m. because that's when they had to lift. And so that work-life balance was a nightmare. You get off the road on a Tuesday. Even if we just play across town on a Tuesday night, you're still not getting home till 10:30 or 11. Wind down, it's midnight. You've got a group at 6 a.m. possibly. And so moving groups out of the morning and trying to structure it where they can get sleep, where I can get sleep, I can spend time with my little one at home after we get off the road, instead of having to be back at TCU at 6:30 in the morning, 7 in the morning, something like that, where I can roll in mid-morning and then have my groups at noon, roll over to practice. It's just structuring my day differently than the typical strength coach has been an absolute lifesaver in the last 2 years since I've had a little one.
Anybody that's listening that maybe just like you manages a department that has people below them, what would be your piece of advice to make sure that they can structure it like that for their staff?
Yeah, it's having to work. We only have one weight room here at TCU, so it's really having to work with each other a ton to figure out that scheduling. But one of the questions that I ask all of our staff members here on their basically on their yearly reviews was, were you the strength coach that you wanted to be? Were you the person at home that you wanted to be? Were you the father, the husband, whatever it is that you wanted to be at home? Because I don't want you to be the strength coach that you want to be, and then at home you're not the person that you want to be at home with your kids, with your wife. And so I want to make sure that they have that work-life balance. And it's just a give and take of figuring out what teams can be in here at what times, and really communicating and working together so that you don't have to be up here at 6 a.m. if if we can possibly avoid that. We've also tried structuring teams so that the last team is out of the weight room before 5 p.m. so that all of our teams are in here essentially starting their training session no later than 4. And I think that's been a big thing that has that's helped some of our staff members in the last year. Now, it's not always perfect. It's not, there's ideal and there's optimal. Ideal is the perfect scenario. That's not always how it works. Sometimes you got to have optimal. What's the best? What's the the best situation around ideal? And sometimes that's early morning workouts. Sometimes it's late at night. But we're trying our best to avoid those 6 a.m. and then, I've also got another team at 5:30 p.m. rolling in here. And now I'm going to be at work for, 16 hours today. We're trying our best to avoid that.
Staying here on that kind of topic, the fact of being in an administrative role, we're starting to see strength coaches get more and more of those roles that I think used to be held by athletic trainers. If you could just elaborate on that for our listeners who are eyeing that and want it, and maybe if it's harder than people think, let them know. But what would you say to those that aspire to get those administrative positions? What are the good, the bad, and looking back on it, what would you tell yourself if you had the ability to?
Yeah, so the good with it is just the ability to start, in a way, kind of blending thought processes into a holistic approach. We know that it's not just the siloed approach is antiquated, and that's what we see so much of in strength and conditioning, is that strength and conditioning is siloed from practices, from the skill development, from the technical and the tactical aspects, from the sports medicine, and they're all siloed. And so that's one area that I've really tried to have a big influence on with our younger coaches, especially, is that we need to blend all these pieces together. You need to be going to your sport coaches and seeing what's happening at practice. You need to be going to practice. You need to be looking at workloads. We need to try to get GPS with these energy system dependent sports so that what's going on at practices. It's blending all of these pieces so that we can create ultimate athletic performance and hopefully injury reduction, health in our athletes. That's really what it's all about. That's the good. The bad is being on the administrative side is not all it's cracked up to be. It is meetings. It is a lot of headaches that you didn't realize that you had. And so I am so much less of a coach now than I was previously. That's what people don't understand is, to be honest, I'm not a strength coach anymore a lot of days. You take off that hat because you have so many other roles. Your time is extremely, extremely what the word is here, obviously valuable, but that's not the word I'm looking for. It's under demand at all times because there's always somebody walking through that door that says, hey, I've got a problem. A coach walking in the door says, hey, I've got a problem with this staff member. It's always something. Just walking out of the building in the evenings to go to my car, you get stopped by 2, 3, 4 people. And before you know it, my wife is yelling at me because I told her I was leaving 35 minutes ago. And she's like, where in the F are you? Well, I got stopped 3 times on the way to the parking lot with issues. And so you are less of a coach than you ever dreamed of. A lot of times I find myself, this is where it's been the most difficult is time management. A lot of times I find myself having to write my programs with baseball at midnight at home because I don't have time during the day to do that stuff, to do that work, because it's meetings. It's, like I said, the pop-in, somebody randomly coming in the office, a phone call. We've got this problem. And now you've got to figure these situations out while you're on campus. And so a lot of times I'm taking my work home with me. And to me, I shouldn't do that. I have to manage my time better. And that's one of the things that I've had to clean up in the last couple months.
switching gears a little bit into the actual X's and O's of baseball. One of the things I think most people know you for is how prominent max velocity work is with your baseball team. If you don't mind, kind of just diving into a little bit of that and how you've been able to evolve it in your time there.
Yeah, so started out as a young strength coach. I believed all the things that you know that were prominent 20 years ago, that you don't do max speed work because you're going to hurt the athletes, you're going to have a hamstring issue. These were things that I was kind of taught as a young strength coach. And how that's evolved is just realizing and understanding that you have to inoculate them against that, right? And so the principles for us are going to be fast, fresh, and frequent. We want to run fast when we're training speed. I want that, Charlie Francis, 95% plus as far as our intent or intensities. Fresh, we want our guys to feel good every time that they go out to try to run fast. And a plan B is always better than the plan A of getting hurt, right? So if they've got hamstring issues, if they've got anything going on, I tell them, you have to communicate that to me. Before we ever run a rep full speed, I tell them, you need to let us know how you're feeling. If you don't feel up to it, I want you to stay a half step to one step under, which is what we consider our 90 to 95% zone. So we'll say half step to one step underneath. Max intent, we're still going to get some good work out of it, but there is an exponential difference between 85% sprints and 100% sprints in intent. We had a Zoom this was last semester or 2 semesters ago with Dr. Heiderscheit from the University of Wisconsin. And he is the lead researcher for hamstring injuries in the NFL. And so they've done research on the difference in sprinting between, I think it was 85 or 90%, and what a max effort 100% sprint was on, I think it was, motor unit activation or whatever it was, EMG readings possibly. And there was just an exponential difference in that small little gap. And so if we've got guys that are having issues, we say 90 to 95%, that half step to one step underneath full intent, we'll still get good work in. So it's communicating with the athletes on that fresh. And then frequency, we want to touch max speed every week, essentially. So I tell the athletes this all the time, that frequency is the most important thing. Baseball is a real challenge because the athletes go home for 5 weeks before they start the first day of practice, essentially. And so they have to stay on their stuff. That's why you see so many injuries in spring training and preseason baseball. That's when all the injuries stack up, is because they've been on their own for the previous 4 or 5 weeks. And if they haven't been doing their stuff with intent that we want, matching the demands of the sport, you're going to come in and you're going to break in those first 4 weeks of practices. So that frequency has to be there. I tell them, I don't care if you lift in the weight room over Christmas break. I don't care. That's not what I need. I need you to be hitting the volumes, the intensities, and the densities that we're gonna see on field in practice, so that you're matching the demands. The barbell isn't out on the field. I don't need you to match the squat demands of baseball. I need you to match the movement demands. And with that means we have to hit high speeds on a weekly basis.
For any of our baseball or even softball listeners out there, has there been, what was, if any, pushback you had from the coaches on being able to touch that quality? And then what would you advise to our listeners that are trying to work with their coaches and their high performance teams?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever really gotten any pushback. And part of that is because I continually educated our coaching staff from the moment I got into TCU and I took this job. I talked about this in the presentation at CVAPS. It's a continual education process in our staff meetings, throughout the year. Really, if there's something I want to do, change, I'll notify those guys, but I'll educate them on why we're doing that. So even just on my interview process, I had a PowerPoint put together. I mean, most coaches are doing something like this. I educated them on the standards that I have, all the principles of our programming and how we're going to operate. So they knew before they hired me what they were getting. The first day or the first week that I was on campus, I did that same thing again for the coaching staff and the players, because I wanted the players to understand exactly where I was coming from, all the principles that I believe in and how we are going to train. Speed and power are the first of those principles. That's what we're going to chase speed and power all day long with our athletes. And so I educated them from the first day. And we used to do that. I don't necessarily do it as much anymore with the athletes because it's a continual education process in the workout, the training session itself. But for the first, 10 or 12 years, I would sit down with the athletes when they walked on campus that first few weeks, and we would go through that PowerPoint again. And I would tell them, here are the standards, the principles, everything, the expectations that I have for you in our training sessions, so that there was never any question, just to get everybody on board. So to me, it is a continual education process, because the only reason that coaching staffs wouldn't allow you to do speed work or anything else that should be happening in any, in any competent training session is because they are uneducated about it. They're uneducated, right? And sometimes, yes, you're going to find coaching staffs that won't bend, and that's a tough situation. But to me, you can always overcome that with education. And there were times outside of speed development that I did have to educate and was beating your head against a wall all the time. But eventually it got through. I used to have our orthopedic surgeons come in. In fact, we had our spine ortho come in, and he gave a talk to our coaching staff on pars fractures, because we would have a plethora of back injuries, right? And so I preach about this all the time. In the South, we see pars fractures all the time. So pars fractures, for the listeners out there, are basically a stress fracture in the lumbar spine from overextension and rotation. They are the most common teenage injury, especially in males, that you are going to see across the board. Happens in the South a ton because warm weather, we are playing all the time. You don't really see it much in the North. So we came in, we had the spine ortho come in and give a talk to our coaching staff on pars fractures, how they come about, why they are not the fault of the weight room, and just educate our staff about why they are prevalent in baseball and what's going on. And so it was a chance to educate. And coming out of that meeting, our head coach had a better understanding, because I could talk to him all day long about why the weight room is not creating these pars fractures. It's 1 hour, 3 times a week in the weight room is not the problem, versus these high school kids who are playing baseball for, 5 hours a day, taking swings in a cage with 2 different coaches, a lessons coach on the side as well. And then, they're doing this for 20 hours a week. The weight room isn't the problem. And so I needed somebody else to get that message across. And so we've done things with our orthopedic surgeons to help get that message across.
I mean, that's fantastic. Anybody that's listening to that, hopefully you wrote stuff down, because I know I did, about how you could potentially work to educate. Did you also have, throughout that educational process, were there any times gaining groups of the players, like, hey, you know what, my friends at these schools, they're not doing this and they're more successful? Just because, again, I know our listeners out there, they have situations like that. They talk about it, on the site. Has that happened, and how do you handle any of those situations with your athletes? And if not, I mean, that's awesome. More power to you.
Yeah. So no, I really don't face that problem ever. And part of it is because of the culture that we've instilled, and the culture that has been in place for the 16 years that I've been here. Myself and the head coach, who is actually at Texas A&M now, he left a year ago, the former head coach, we were very much on the same wavelength as far as culture development, as far as the standards and expectations of the program. And so I couldn't have been put into a better situation. And that's really what should go back to the first question I think you asked about, how have you been at some place so long? It was because the head coach and I saw eye to eye and had the same standards, expectations across the board for the program, of where the program needed to go. And that's where you see a lot of problems with people moving in our field. It's because the head coach and the performance coach, strength and conditioning, don't see eye to eye, and it's continually butting heads. And sometimes you have to make exceptions or find another job in a way. But that is why I was able to stay in place for so long, is because of that. And because of those standards, expectations, and the culture we set. We don't have athletes that come in here and say, hey, I want to do this, this, and this, or I don't believe in what we're doing. My buddy's doing this. I saw this on social media. I really never run into that problem. And I would attribute some of that to the fact that we educated them early on when I would come in and I would give them all those, educational talks to emphasize why we're doing what we're doing so that we didn't have any backlash against it. I I really don't face that problem at all.
No, that's awesome. And is this, so you teed up the CVAS question I was going to ask you about, was that head coach the same one that you talked about, asked you why are all strength coaches so bitter?
Yes, that was the exact, yes, same one.
So for anybody that's listening now that was not at CVAS, if you could, say that story again, because I think, I know it hit home with me and some of
Sure.
my other friends that were there, they definitely, took notes on that.
Yeah. So this was my second or third year at TCU here, and I walked into the baseball staff's office on a Saturday before practice in the fall. Football was on the road. I didn't travel with football at that time, or that Saturday, that particular Saturday, and so had a Saturday off. Or no, let me rephrase this question. We had a recruit coming in on Saturday. This was during the week. I'm sorry, I screwed this up a little bit. We had a recruit coming in on Saturday. During the week, I walk into the office and our head coach says, "Hey, we got a recruit that's going to be here on Saturday. I need you in here at 9 a.m. Talk to this kid." And I didn't say anything, but I showed it in my body language. And he snapped at me and he was like, why are all strength coaches so jaded? And there was a few more choice words in there than that, but I was like, what the hell is this guy talking about? He's like, every strength coach I have ever worked with is jaded. They're a pain in the ass that hates their job, that hates life, and act like you. I was like, man, I walked out of the office, bitch to friends, bitch to colleagues. And then I realized like this guy was right because my attitude, my energy towards something that I love, which is developing human beings, developing athletes through the vehicle of strength and conditioning. I love it. I was portraying the attitude and energy of a lot of my colleagues that I had basically been around because what I had come up in strength and conditioning and a lot of my current colleagues at the time were traditional strength coaches. I don't know what to call it, but your traditional old school strength coaches that were like F the staff, F administration. Everybody's out to get us. They all hate us. We don't get paid enough. We get overworked. And all these thoughts and feelings that really, a lot of strength and conditioning coaches have. And I realized I was letting their energy, their attitude reflect in me to my athletes and coaching staff. And it was from that moment on that I realized I had to change. I had to be somebody different. I couldn't do that anymore. And really what it was if I was going to go anywhere in this field, especially with TCU baseball, the head coach at the time, it was going to have to be me separating myself from all the traditional strength and conditioning, thoughts and feelings that I had grown up in. And so that was the moment that I switched and it was a life-changing moment for me. And then on top of that, the other big thing that helped give me authority for all the listeners out there was social media. It was being a positive influence on social media and just using it at the time to educate because my coaching staff saw that. They read the stuff that I was putting out. The administration here saw that. I retweeted an article one time by who was it? Let's see. I can't remember. Worked in administration, he's a big time baseball strength coach. Anyway, he wrote an article, I believe, that talked about how strength coaches are undervalued, underappreciated, and how you can create, more of these things for yourself. And I retweeted it and wrote a little thing on it. And our athletic director was like, "Hey, I just saw your article. I want to talk to you about this. I want to see how we can be, we can create change in this field for you guys." So just something like that, like these people are watching. And so it helped to give me authority, probably more than anything else. I continually educated him in staff meetings, but it was when I had social media and I started gathering a following and the snowball kind of started rolling that people around me started considering me as the authority a little bit. And so that helped tremendously.
I want to, before we go into the social media side or any of the fact that you wrote a book, do you also have to present and educate at an even higher level, whether it be senior level and at like all staff meetings? Because some of, I know, our assistant athletic directors do that? And if so, what is your advice on how to, again, put that hat on and manage that room or manage donors? Because I know, fundraising has become something that these assistant AD positions are doing.
Yeah, so I haven't done it to a large degree yet. I do with our administrators. It's the same way. It's educating them, but it's educating them a little bit differently. It's educating them on the importance of, honestly, it's advocating for our staff members a lot. It's advocating with the sport coaches on our staff members. What I probably do more of is just that, advocate for our staff, to try to get raises, to try to change titles and things like that. It's very early on in my tenure as far as a director now. I think I've been in this role officially overseeing everything now for right at a year. But yes, it's educating the administration. You just go about it differently, right? It's not, they don't care about the principles behind your speed work, right? They care about the things of like, here's why I need money for this technology. Here's why this coach needs to get a bump in pay, or we need to change his title and restructure the department. It's those types of things to try to advocate and elevate our coaching staff versus like, we've been talking about the strength and conditioning principles. They don't care about that stuff, right? And ideally, this field needs to move towards where you have a performance coach that oversees multiple departments, psychology, performance, strength and conditioning, what we call performance now, but strength and conditioning, the nutritional side, whether it's sports medicine, somebody that oversees all those departments so that you have a holistic vision moving forward and not these siloed approaches. And that's something that's where we're trying to educate the administration, so that we eliminate people that really have no, they have no like reason to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? I can't think today. It's like I got CTE going on. They shouldn't be overseeing our department, right? Because you have administrators everywhere that have never trained an athlete, have never worked as a coach, that oversees strength and conditioning, right? And so the goal is to get people where they can value and judge or review how strength coaches are actually doing, right? Because they've been in that setting, they've been in that scenario, and that's really what the ultimate goal is to create the vision for administration, so that we create a position of a performance administrator that oversees all these different departments, so that we can have a holistic vision going forward, so that sports medicine and strength and conditioning understand the rehab process. Those processes are standardized so that you know exactly where your role is, where that happens, because that is a big missing piece in our field a lot of times, right? Silos again. The strength coach thinks he should be doing PT and rehab stuff over here, and it pisses off the ATCs. And you get this back and forth battle a lot of times between staffs that think they each need to do this, and they're not working together. And so it's trying to create that holistic vision. That's what it is.
How do you handle that, that exact need that you talked about for collaboration, but respecting it in an authentic way, but also understanding that, like you said, people may have other jobs that they have to do during the day, so they don't have the ability to be like, hey, all right, everybody's going to lift together at this time, or hey, we're going to go ahead and learn about this together. How, in your opinion, does that get resolved?
Yeah, I mean, that's not an easy one. For us, it is it's trying to create the relationship as best as you can with the other departments. And I think when you have your performance coaches, we have a very, very fortunate situation in that all of our staff basically has a big sport and then one other Olympic sport in there as well. So, I've got baseball. I train rifle as well. The office next to me, Coach Larson, has women's basketball and equestrian. And so when we only have a few sport responsibilities, it's trying to get that coach to go and be involved with the sport as much as possible. I talked about this at CVAPs as well. the field is going to where strength coaches are very specialized. And so we want you to be at practice. I want you to know what the hell's going on at practice. I want you to know the demands that are happening, what your coach's expectations and standards are at practices. And when you're a part of the team in every facet, you have relationships with your athletic trainer because you guys are working hand in hand. And so that's the thought process we want is I need you to be involved with the team at every level, not just in the weight room. Because when I started 20 years ago, it was, hey, soccer team will be up there at 2:15 to lift. I did a, mobility session, quick mobility session, warm up. We're off to the lift. Send you guys out of here. Next team's rolling in, right? You got 9 other teams that you have to train. They go out and do speed work, conditioning, agility, whatever they were doing with their coaching staff, and you had no idea what was going on. You were in the weight room. You ran it like it was basically an assembly line. They just team. You didn't do anything outside of that. Now, strength and conditioning coaches are becoming very specialized. That's the future. We have a great situation with only a few sports per coach. So go out and be a part of that team as much as you can so that you build relationships with all the sports staff, the coaches, the sports medicine. And that gives us the ability to be able to bridge those gaps a little bit better, in my opinion, when that time comes.
We had Justin Kavanaugh on the show this week, and he talked about the fact that as you talk about specialized strength coaches, he said now today more than ever, you don't have to be a former athlete of that sport, and now you're working in it. He obviously said there's pros and cons to it, right? Like kids that wanted to be in a certain sport, now they can. But also the downside is maybe you didn't play it, so you don't know exactly what's going on. I'd like to hear your 2 cents on it in terms of that specialization and, almost the fact that you could work with any sport. Is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I was a guy, I played high school baseball. I didn't play college baseball. I went and worked for the Anaheim Angels for 2 years and got the job at TCU because I had been in professional baseball, but played college football. It was a football baseball role here. And that's why it was a perfect fit for me. But I didn't come from a baseball, a college baseball athlete background. And that actually helped me when I got to pro baseball because at the time, pro baseball was an interesting place as a strength coach. I'll give you an example. We had 15 machines in a room, and the workout training session for the athletes, the pro baseball guys, was one set of 15 to 20 on every machine. Just go down the row, go down this row, and it was like tricep extensions, right? The old preacher curl tricep extension, bicep curl, crunch machine. That's what the workout was. And so I came into the situation and had very, very outside the box thoughts about what baseball should be. Speed training, the power stuff. I came from a background of football and track and field, and everything I had read and studied was Eastern Bloc, Soviet research, all that stuff. And so my thoughts when walking into a professional baseball organization were so far away from what baseball was. That actually helped me. That helped me early on in my career a ton. And that's part of what I guess gave me the soapbox to stand on, was that people were like, well, this isn't how baseball is done. And we were training in season, we were lifting on game days. And so that was a big, big piece of it, in that I didn't have the preconceived notions walking into it because I had been a baseball guy, right? And so that helped me tremendously. Now, on the flip side, there's times when you get guys that weren't a part of sport that kind of have no feel. There's in baseball, you have to have some feel in the locker room, in the dugout. And so you do miss that sometimes with guys that with coaches, I shouldn't say guys, but men and women that haven't been around the sport. Sometimes they lack feel, and that has to be learned a little bit. But I think it's absolutely fine that you weren't in the sport to train it now.
Another question on that is, in terms of this specialized, strength coaches, I personally feel like there's a starting growing trend where maybe they're only good enough at that sport because everything to them has to be just sport specific. Are we as a field losing the ability to kind of coach anybody in any setting if you had to?
Yeah, that's the one downside of it, is you get tied into one thing, and if you don't have a great if you don't have a great network around you to learn, and places like Strength Coach Network to go see other stuff, then yeah, I think you get tied into your thoughts a little bit too much, and I think it limits you. This is why I recommend, and this is tough, but I recommend to all of our interns, our young coaches, I say the best thing that you can do is go to a small school where you have 9 other teams. Now, the problem is that you end up having to run the weight room a little bit too much as that assembly line where you have to bring a team in, they're out, bring a team in, they're out. You might not get to participate in practices as much, but you get so much more out of time management, out of building efficient systems, understanding how to manipulate the space and the equipment that you have. I was a GA, an athlete and a GA at Missouri State. We had 6 racks. We had 2.5 med balls. The interns here, we have a room downstairs with probably 90 to 150 med balls, right? They have access to anything that they want. And I'm like, when you leave here and go somewhere else and you're actually paid to coach, they're not going to have this. They're not going to have 12 6-pound med balls and 10 4-pounders or, 15 10s. You're going to have a 12, a 6, and a broken 20 that's spitting out sand. And you're going to have to figure out how to make this stuff work. And the best thing you can do is go somewhere where you don't have everything, because then you really, really learn not only how to coach, but how to program efficiently around your equipment, your space, your time. And so I think the best thing young coaches can do is go somewhere that's not a Power 5 with access to everything.
All right, let's change. Like I said, you teased it before, but obviously you have a presence on social media for strength and conditioning coaches. You also wrote a book. I don't know if other people have read it or what the other people feel about it. It's in our internship curriculum, so it's a well-known book where I'm at. So talk about how you were able to do that. A, B, what inspired you to do it, and C, how did you still keep the main thing and coach while doing, those other things?
Yeah. So it came out of necessity, and I didn't have to create anything. So this is what it was. For 16 years, really for 20 years since I've been in strength and conditioning, I had a foundation program. These are the foundational movements that I want my athletes to know and learn. This is how you learn how to lift, because I was a young strength coach, like we talked about at Missouri State. I had a lot of female teams. Many of these female athletes had never stepped foot in a weight room. They didn't know anything about holding a barbell at the time. And so I taught these foundational movements. This is what you have to know so that we can advance in strength and conditioning over the next 2 or 3, 4 years that you're here. That's all it was. So I've always had this program around. I got so many emails from baseball coaches when I got to TCU about, hey, send me a program. Will you send me what you're doing? Or what should I do with my high school kids? How would you program this? And first off, I can't send you the program because, you have no idea what these exercises movements are. I'm not going to do that. And so it was just a continual beating of what should I do with my athletes? What should I do with my athletes from high school coaches? And so I knew the need was there. And so, it took me 14 months to write the book. And I would say 11 of those months were staring at a screen, trying to figure out what I should say without telling somebody what to do. Because how do you tell somebody what the workout is? There's so much context that goes into it. And I was like, man, I don't want to tell everybody the secrets. I don't want to give them all the secrets of what we do and how to implement this. So how can I sneakily type this thing up so that you really don't know what we do, but you kind of do? And then I heard he was a famous baseball coach at LSU that had won multiple national titles back in the 80s. And he was implementing sports psychology at the time when nobody else was. And he gave away the program. He wrote it and gave it away. And I heard him do an interview, and he said, they said, Coach, you're giving your program away. Everybody's going to be beating you at national championships now because you're giving them the secret stuff. And he's like, nobody else will run this the way that I run it. It doesn't matter what I give them. I'll tell them everything. Nobody will ever run this the way I run it because I run it unique to my system. And the light bulb went off, and I was like, that's it. That's absolutely it. And so the day I heard that, I started typing. I took a Saturday, and I might have wrote this in 2 Saturdays actually, but then, the refining process, all that. I just started writing when our kids step on campus the first day. I started writing what we did. Here's the warm up. Here's what we do with them. Here's how we teach the front squat. I wrote it like verbatim from what we do. And that's it. And that was the easiest thing I ever did. I spent 11 or 12 months like smacking my face on a computer, not knowing what to write. How should I type this? How should I do this? And then I just was like, screw that. I'm just going to write this out, how we do it. And then I'll take it from there. I'll pull stuff out if I need to. I didn't pull anything out. And so you just have to do it. That's all it was. And how did I do it? I did it during baseball in season because we have lots of travel and downtime. I used, we got snowed in one time at Kansas, at the University of Kansas in Lawrence. Couldn't take a flight out of Kansas City, so it took a 9-hour bus ride home. And so I wrote probably 3/4 of it on that, created some of the charts. So baseball in season is very, very helpful for when I need to create a product. But that's how it was just tell people what we do. They're not going to run it like I do. And it's so funny because I guarantee you all your coaches out there that are thinking about putting out a product are having the same thoughts I am, and that I don't want to tell people the secrets. I don't want to tell them what we do, how we structure this. BS. I'm telling you right now, that book has sold a whole bunch of copies, and I get emails every day from coaches that say, hey, how do we do this? How do we set up the program on Mondays? And I'm like, I literally put the Excel spreadsheet in there. It's like the workout's in there. It's in there. That's telling you that they will not do it like you do it ever. I get that all the time. Hey, we don't know how to, how do you do 5 sets of 5 on the front squat? Is it this? Is it? And you're like, no, it's just, they won't do it like you do it. Nobody will be able to copy what you have. So just put it out there.
I've heard Boyle say the exact same thing, and I feel the exact same way as you. How about your ability? What was your secret to beating the algorithm and growing a following on social media?
Man, I don't know anything about the algorithm. I didn't even know algorithms existed until until Keir started talking about that. All it was consistent. It was consistent education, and so I tried to post daily, really. And I talked about what we were doing, and it was, I tried to keep it all positive at the time, which from hearing Keir talk about the algorithm is actually the worst thing that you can do. But I didn't want to represent the university myself or our baseball program in a negative light. And so I felt fortunate that they were allowing me to do that and use that as a platform to grow in a way my brand. And so I wasn't going to embarrass anybody with anything that I said and put on social media. But the only thing it was consistent education. That's how it's got to this point, consistent education. And it is really freaking hard, man. It's really hard to keep up with social media and to create content and to do that on a consistent basis. That's where people fail, is they can't do it consistently. Months, years. They can't keep up with it.
Like I said, you're in season. So first of all, you're in season. We're going to expect Movement Over Max's part 2 this summer, because you're going to be traveling, and hopefully there was the ice storm in Dallas not too long ago. Like, you should have been writing.
Oh yeah,
you should have got at least part 2 halfway done.
It's funny you say that, because that is actually on the list for it's a release in the fall, would be the advances to Moving Over Maxes. Yeah,
see, you heard it here first, everybody. So we'll let you go. Go ahead and just let everybody know where they can, continue to follow you more on social media. We're going to put it in the show notes, but excuse me, that way people know where they can continue to learn from you.
Yeah, everything's going to be Zach Dechant, basically. So Twitter, Instagram, those are the 2 big platforms. Those are at Zach Dechant. ZachDechant.com is where you can, find all the products, any of the blog stuff that I post. So, yeah.
Appreciate you, man. Go about the rest of your day and have a good one.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.